What's your response to this poll out yesterday by YouGov, placing Reform above the Tories for the very first time?
Well, obviously, good morning. We're delighted with that poll, which reflects what we're hearing up and down the country as our candidates are campaigning. Something's happening out there. It's quite extraordinary. So we were hoping that we would get to equality and then what they call crossover in the polls. And of course, this is the Rolls Royce of pollsters. It's not some Mickey Mouse pollster that no one's heard of. And the other polls are beginning to catch up. The momentum is with us. Something is definitely happening out there. Word is spreading. And voters actually, I think, are just thrilled that there's a serious alternative, credible option putting forward different policies about how you make work pay, how you get people off benefits, how you can lift the income tax threshold to £20,000 from £12,500, how you can get to zero waiting lists on healthcare and reform the way we do healthcare, still free at the point of delivery, and how you freeze immigration in order to allow the country to catch up. These are the things that people want to talk about, and they're delighted when we arrive on the doorstep and say, have we got news for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting talking to one of our viewers earlier on. He says common sense policies are appealing to him. The problem with it is, Richard, as punters, we've got to take so much of it on trust, haven't we? I mean, you come up with these ideas, and they're in your contract, to be fair, on the website at the moment and everything else. But we don't actually know how you would implement any of it. I mean, looking at your finances, the funding of Reform UK, I mean, the figures look great. However, how do we know if any of it is real?
Very simple, because if you look at the people involved at the top of Reform UK, we are successful people from the world of business. We've been around the block a few times. We know how to make things happen, to fix things and to sort things. That's why people trust us. They're bored of the sort of policy wonk politicians from the main two parties who've never had a proper job, never actually been out there, rolled up their sleeves, got stuck in, sweated about how they're going to pay the salaries at the end of the week for the business that they run. That's who we are, and that's why I think people are saying, thank heavens for that. It's not waffle, it's quality, not quantity. And we're the people, for example, that have been talking about how you can pay for that income tax increase in the threshold by stopping this ridiculous voluntary payment by the Bank of England of interest on all its printed money. We've raised that. We've now got the Financial Times agreeing with us. We've got Robert Peston agreeing with us. We've got economists from left and right agreeing with us. And yet zero response from the Treasury or the Bank of England or the Chancellor, because they're embarrassed that we're right. And we know we're making progress. When the big banks lobby groups start attacking us, we're definitely on the right side of the people.
Richard, I wanted to ask you about policy, because Nigel Farage, speaking last night, says that you are now the main opposition to the Labour Party. And we saw the Labour Party's manifesto, didn't we? A lot of it focused on schools and overhauling our schools, VAT on private school fees, for example. What Reform do about education in this country?
It's very simple. We'll do exactly the opposite of the absurd Labour policy, which is going to... Labour's plan will dump 100,000 children back into the state education system, which means that everybody in state education will have bigger, more pressured class sizes, more pressured teachers, and the quality of education for all will deteriorate. What you should do with education is actually say, no, if you can afford to pay a bit more, then we'll give you a tax incentive of basic rate tax relief in order to go independent, and that'll free up pressure on the state education system, which means everybody gets a better system, and you've got more choice. And that will drive... Competition is a good thing. It drives up standards. It drives down costs. It's exactly the same in healthcare. Here's my prediction. I think one of the secret things that the Labour Party is not telling you is they want to put VAT on independent healthcare. And again, that will just add pressure onto the already overburdened, overpressured NHS. And the other key thing that we've got to do is we've got to freeze immigration to let the country catch up, because public services are massively under pressure. Our quality of life is reducing. Everybody's getting poorer. We're in the longest per person recession since records began some 70 years ago, for heaven's sake.
How do you do that with immigration? I mean, they're talking to a guest earlier on, Richard, and they were saying, well, look, for a kick-off, it would still mean about 400,000 people coming in, even if you had net migration. But what happens if you have a sector that suddenly has a requirement for a whole load of jobs that we don't have, for workers that we don't have in this country?
Hey,
what do you do? Suddenly lift that ban?
No. Hey, guess what? Market forces prevail, and yes, in that sector, if there's a bit of a shortage, businesses have to do one of two things. You either pay more salaries to attract people, or if you can't afford that, you invest in capital equipment to improve productivity. That's literally the basic thrust of how economies have worked for 200 years until we changed the whole dynamic and suddenly allowed just a complete mass increase in supply of overseas labour. So actually, a shortage of labour is a good thing. It'll improve productivity. It'll lift wages for British people. We've seen almost zero real wage growth in the last 15 years or so in this country. In the 1990s, we had about 2.5%, 2.7% per annum real wage growth. That's what I want to get back. That's why Reform UK is the party of the workers.
Richard, what do you say to people like Dave Clark, who emailed us in this morning and accused the Reform Party of being a one-trick pony party on immigration?
Well, if you look at the draft contract that we've got on our website, we're producing our sort of final contract on Monday. You can see 30 pages of lots of policies on different issues, how you stimulate growth, how you make work pay, how you get people off benefits, how you get to zero waiting lists on healthcare, how you get safer streets, and how freezing immigration and how you stop the boat. So there's a whole range of policies. So with the greatest of respect to Mr. Clark, I think when you really look at it, you can say, actually, those are a whole range of policies. Of course, there's more. And that's because we've got the common sense to raise these issues. And look, I'm not in any way saying there aren't other ways of doing things. What I am saying is you can't tax your way out of a crisis like the Tories and Labour want to do. You've got to grow your way out of crisis. You've got to think boldly. You've got to do things differently. You've got to change the way we run this great country.
I wonder if, amidst the celebrations, Richard, of this poll, which, is a historic moment in its own right, but are you holding your head in your hands a little bit? Because, translating it into a parliament would still put, despite the Tories being behind you in this poll, would give them 70-odd seats and you 5.
And thank you for making the case for proportional representation, because that's patently, totally unfair. If we get, as I think we will now, with this momentum, every prospect, we get more votes cast for Reform UK than the Conservatives. We become the democratic, legitimate opposition, and yet the seat numbers wouldn't reflect that. So it was patently absurd. So, look, we are where we are. We operate under the voting system we've got. We'd like to change it. But I think more and more people will say, thank heavens for reform. We've got to also reform our voting system, amongst many other things. That's who we are. But surely democracy is better served when there's more options, more serious contenders on the ballot paper, and more debate about different ways to govern and manage the country. That's who we are. That's what we're doing. And that common sense approach from people who know what they're doing and have got a successful track record, that's why we're succeeding in the polls, and other polls I think will soon catch up.
I would certainly agree with you on the need for more debate in this country, Richard. I mean, that's why we exist here on GB News. Good to see you this morning.